Okay, we are live. It's Friday happy hour. I forgot my drink, but here's my toast. Welcome if you're joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining in. I love the group of women that I get to be exposed to in my life. It brings me so much joy to, first of all, to have women healers that I know and love spread their message and spread their word. And then my other friends, I get to learn about some different healing modalities, learn about different stories, learning about different ideas. And that's such a beautiful thrill for me to connect people. I think that's like my love language. So besides cat memes, that's my love language. So tonight we have a really beautiful guest, Amber Tarcha. She is, I'm going to give her bio really quick, her short bio. She is a healer, and after being thrown onto a path of deep self-healing, she became passionate to share with others earth-based modalities and ancient wisdom that was helping her live a radically different life from before. She combines her knowledge of sensual movement and performance with her shamanic path to help others unleash the wild parts of themselves, calling out to be seen, heard, and expressed. So welcome, my dear.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you. You're one of my favorite people that I haven't met in person yet.
Soon to be rectified, right?
Yes, we will be seeing each other.
So if you're using really quick, if you're using StreamYard, you have to accept their conditions. Otherwise, we can't see who is saying hi. So make sure you accept their terms and conditions to say hi. I know it's like a weird extra step. But anyway, let's dive right in. I want Amber to kind of talk about her trajectory of going from kind of like Normville, right? Like, business owner, successful business owner, doing her own thing, actually living a sensual life because your work was in pole dancing, right? And then being a business owner, and then kind of having these like the come to Jesus moments where you felt like you needed to make a radical shift. So I'd love for people to kind of hear that story of yours.
Yeah. So my name's Amber, and I started humbly in a small town of Texas and was a hairstylist very early, but I was like the entrepreneur, wanted to be financially independent by like 21, and moved to Austin and started cutting hair and working with real estate agents and trying to do the big thing. And I was cutting hair successfully, bought my first condo when I was young, but was feeling that calling to go outside of the country. I've never traveled. And so on a hunch, on following spirit, I went down to South America and didn't know what I was going to find. Thought I was going to be a professional tango dancer, and ended up finding pole dancing. And I was like, you've got to be freaking kidding me that like, out of all the things, universe, pole dancing, like that's what I have to, that's what's doing it for me. So I came back to the
universe was like, oh no.
Yeah. So, and of course in Argentina, pole dance, it's back in 2007. So their sensuality is so different, and it's so empowered. Like these women were empowered, and sexuality was so love and handled with care and empowerment and pride. And so I got back to the States, and pole dancing classes weren't around. It was a very hush taboo subject. And so I was like, this is the business I'm supposed to make. And so that's, so I started my business out of my living room. Every year it grew until I got my own space. And fast forward like 5 to 6 years in growing the business, and I was opening up my second studio. At this time, I had won like pole competitions. I was dancing for a award-winning site-specific aerial dance company where basically I would rappel off the side of 50-foot, or 50-story buildings and dance in a harness. And basically was doing everything right from what the outside world told me was like accomplishment. Like I had a condo I owned, I had a successful business, I was a business owner, kind of making my own schedule. I was a workaholic and I was drinking a lot. And, you know, I had all this outward success and identity and all this ego and, you know, ego getting, built up, but I would go home really lonely and really sad and had a lot of, just things that I didn't understand that weren't being healed. And so it wasn't until I went, my second studio, this massive expansion, big accomplishment was opening, and I had to go to Europe for a friend's wedding. And it was in Europe where I really saw the contrast of how miserable I was and how disconnected from myself I had become. I was speaking to friends over there. They didn't care about my accomplishments. They didn't care that I was doing this, that, and that, which I got so much attention for back in the States. They were asking me questions about like, well, what do you like to do with your free time? And I'm like, I don't have free time. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean hobbies, you know? And I was finding myself,
that's my free time.
yeah, I'm like, what do you mean? That's my life. And so it's kind of embarrassing. And then I also was just completely disconnected from that, my, you know, the world and work, that I started this other side of me started coming out. I had I had time to read magazines and be interested in other things. And I got kind of connected to this other side of myself that I could never express back in the States. And I even was talking to my friend that was traveling with me, and I was like, oh my God, like, I'm so excited about this topic. I want to maybe do this when I go back home. She immediately was like, oh, Amber, you're not like that. You know, you're going to go back and do this and this and this, and you're this person. And I realized how like blocked in I was from that. Like basically, like I had become so much of my identity and role that my whole world wouldn't allow me to be anything else. And so I came back to the States and kind of had a meltdown. I like literally had a meltdown and decided to step away from my second location expansion. I literally handed over my expansion to my freaking competition. Like I made that phone call and literally just surrendered and walked away from the money, walked away from the success, the ego. And I also walked away from my whole life. Like once I stepped away from that expansion, my first studio was running okay to give me income. And so I was no longer in rehearsals. Basically I realized even my friends were only my friends because it was work. And I went on this journey of having to sit and deal with me and look back at all the ambers that I left behind and repressed and shoved down.
Wow. Because one of the things that, obviously like we create our own boxes, but the fact that your environment was saying, no, you have to be in this box in order for us to like maintain friendship, or in order for, for your life to be a certain way, people were asking you to be a certain way. And it makes sense why you had to get rid of all of that stuff, because your environment wasn't conducive to change either. So it's really hard to take the solo journey, but oftentimes we feel like there's no other option. And it sounds like that's what you were faced. It wasn't really, maybe it wasn't even really a choice as much as it was something that was like really thrust upon you.
Well, and it's a death and rebirth process. It's so fascinating. It's like, I've learned if you don't do your own work, and if you're not consciously kind of tapping into your own internal growth, that the universe will step in. And I had that. And usually when the universe has to step in, it's not as pleasant as you want it to be.
A gentle nudge.
Yeah.
Push off.
And it'll keep showing you all the worst relationships to push all your buttons. And like, I mean, I was spiraling out. Like I was suicidal. I was having a man live with me that was just so abusive, and one of my mentors at the time, that's where I kind of really started understanding the work that I do now. Is like, she started explaining to me that all the things that were triggering me and going on were actually things that were trying to help me. Like my worst enemies at the time were actually the biggest blessings, because they were reflecting to me what needed to be healed. And that was like the major switch where I started finding out all the years of going to psychologists that didn't really help me progress or feel better at an emotional level, even though I understood why all the abuse was doing what it was doing. But then I started learning, like, oh, there's all these different layers. Like, your emotional body still has to be addressed. Your energetic body has to be addressed. And your past, there's all these healings of the past. And that's all the work that I do now. It's all about working at those deeper levels that actually can shift, because just mentally understanding this stuff doesn't change much usually.
Yeah. Yes. So what were some of the things that you had to end up doing? What were some of the practices that you found on this journey?
So I was that person where I didn't know what to do. I was just like, I need help, universe. I didn't know. Like, I there was a couple months where I'm just like, I know I need help, and I need to know what I need to do. Like, that was my like thread out there. I was just like, help me. Like, I don't know. And so random ass shit showed up at my door, or opportunities that I swore off I would never do, like women's circles. Like, I did own a pole studio, ironically, but I never really had good relationships with women at that time. And so I went to my first red tent women's circle, and I was like, these people are weird. These are the hippie girls, the granola girls. And, we all went around the circle and just spoke and was heard. And it was the first time that I spoke about what was going on and didn't have anybody give me advice. No one responded to me. No one projected their own stuff onto me. And I had never had that, because all my friends to that point were always putting this stuff on me about me that was nothing about me. It was about them. But it was like this newfound, like, oh, this is like a place I can go to that's safe. And I can just, and the stuff that I would say, I felt like, oh my God, I'm going to tell these girls that this is going on with me, and they're just going to flip out, or they're not going to be able to handle it. And they were just like, you're so loved. Like, they just were more supportive and more accepting. And that was a shock to my system, because I had never in my whole entire life been able to really talk about some dark shit that was going on and not have people all of a sudden throw their concern or their panic or go into like this advice action. They just were like, they just sent me love. And so that became one of my favorite things to kind of sneak away. That was like my one little sneak away from reality that I had, where I could just have some reprieve and some just feel, again, tapping into like this other part of me. And then I started going to like womb holding circles, and some of the stuff I was like, okay, this is a little weird, but I'm going to do it. And like looking into each other's eyes, and, and then I went to ecstatic dance, and like I had to be dragged to ecstatic dance. And even as a professional dancer, it was hard for me to go into a room and just move. Like, I was like, I'm going to look too good, or I want to look good enough. And then again, it was like all this deconstruction of my ego around movement, and being taught that everything has to look a certain way. But here it was more about feeling. And I was just like, what is going on? And that became one of my favorite things. And I could just sit on the side and cry. And again, it was like I was held, and people just allowed me to the space to just move through emotions. And then I, this ayahuasca, these plant medicines started popping up into conversations, and I was super anti-drug. I ended up in the emergency room smoking marijuana when I was in high school. And I was like, never touching drugs. If I did a line of coke, I will die. Like, so sensitive. And so my friends would always mention, I'm like, you're crazy. Like, why would I ever do that? But it kept coming up. And I was just open, and I was like, all right, if this is a sign from the universe, let me research it. And the more it kind of came up, the more I researched it. And before I knew it, I was sitting in I was sitting in ceremony with the medicine with a Peruvian shaman, and I felt at home. I found my home. I was reconnected to all these parts of myself that I forgot about, or I was too scared to look at, and getting emotional.
Yeah. Well, let me if people don't know, and I actually don't know that much about ayahuasca, but plant medicines are meant to deliver like a truth, right? They're not meant to check out from. You're meant to like check. It's like you're checking back in with yourself. There are certain chemicals in our world that are meant to sort of like kind of tune you out, and there are certain things that are meant to, like what you said, bring you home to your body, bring you home to your mind, and call back those lost parts of yourself. And ayahuasca is one of those friendly drugs. It's a tea, and you have a purging process. So it's not so if anyone watching doesn't know about that, that's a very interesting process. I don't know, everyone has different experiences, but most people say that it's not the most pleasant. The experience itself is not pleasant, because there is a purging, and there's this, you kind of go through this like dark night of the soul. But you come out very different. And people now, I think, ayahuasca is used to heal some addictions and help with trauma. So plant medicines are really about healing, rather than kind of just checking out.
Yeah. And again, as they become more popular, there's so much more information about how to now practice in an ethical manner. And I'm doing a 5-day experience that I have a friend that's specifically speaking on this, because the interesting thing is it's like my opportunities to work with the medicine have just also taught me that all those spaces that you go to working with plant medicines are totally available through breath work, through meditation, through song, through ceremonies that don't even need to have medicine in them. And so I'm a big fan of creating those spaces too, because it's not for everybody, and it's also very sacred, and to even have the opportunity to work with it is very rare for most people. And so I'm interested on how to have people have these deep experiences and connection back to self for free, like basically essentially for like from their own abilities, And so, And for me, my experience into that world cracked open that shamanic energy medicine knowledge that I started studying, and I'm a graduate of Four Winds Society. And it was very clear that like, this is my path to learn more about this, and part of my gifts with voice and, clairvoyance and intuitiveness and speaking to spirits, I always also kind of shut down. And the medicine reminded me, no, this is your gift, child. Like, you were gifted, and not everybody is tapped into this, and you can use your gifts for a reason. And so, and I still, I'm still studying. I'm still such a baby in the world of like being an energy shaman or anything like that. I will never, I feel like there's like masters, and I'm a forever student for sure. But yeah.
But you decided to shift that, like from being a student to also being a practitioner and teaching others and leveraging your gifts. And
yeah.
So what's some of the modalities that you're using? Like, how do you structure this for people?
Yeah. So I mean, I owned a pole studio for 10 years, and I didn't realize I was healing. I didn't realize I was creating change until after, more towards the end of my studio having to close down due to COVID, and having these students that I had been teaching for years all of a sudden come up to me and be like, thank you so much. You had no idea what I was going through when I was taking these pole classes. And I kept hearing these women basically say that this changed their lives, like pole dancing changed their lives. And I'm like, I don't understand how this is changing your life. But again, more as me even being a dancer and kind of going through my own healing journey, I really am, I understood movement, dance, getting in your body, expressing yourself through movement is a very important thing. And trauma is held in the body. Mm-hmm. And to release it, you have to move your body. You have to tap into where are you feeling things? What does it feel like? Energetically, you move things out of your space. And so there's a huge component to your body. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, like, this, you know, reclamation, like this, the idea, like pole dancing is like owning your sexuality, owning like the gift of your sensuality for yourself, for the pleasure of yourself. And that's pretty radical. That's pretty radical for a lot of people, because the message for most women is like, lock that shit down unless you want trouble, or like give it to a person. But the idea that our sexuality and our sensuality is a gift for ourselves. The pleasure of dancing for ourselves is like, is still pretty novel to a lot of people.
Yeah. And I mean, gosh, it was interesting too, because I always taught from like how to make yourself look good on stage to please usually the opposite sex. And there's some people that would teach by just whatever feels good. Like S factor is very like more in the body. So even within teaching sexual movement and sensual movement, and exotic movement and pole dancing, there was a whole other, there were different kinds even. And there was like the club stripping movement, the exotic movement. And then like, so it was interesting how even sensuality could be boxed up and limited within a space that was very encouraging of it. So yeah, and performing and putting on a different persona. Like I always, even in my work today, I'm like, sometimes we have to put on different identities to express. And even with medicine work, they would put on medicine masks to kind of call up different energies and express anger, you know, because Amber's not an angry person, but Angela, she's an angry person. So let's talk where's Angela right now? Because Angela's pissed, right?
Yeah.
So you can even work with your layers that way. And that's a really potent way to work with people as well and bring them through that process. So body movement, dancing, all of that for sure. And just being witnessed too. It's funny, like just having spaces where you can speak and be witnessed and heard and seen. That in itself, I mean, I could have a whole business around just making circles where you show up and have everybody just be seen, say what they need to say. That in itself is healing, is to just have these safe spaces. And then you go into like energy medicine and energy healing, and there's different flavors and different gifts, and everybody has, you know, there's like angelic realms, and then there's shamanics, and then there's like elementals. And my flavor's always changing. I'm learning a lot about like, where am I in that? But I'm very elemental, very shamanic mama, Pachamama, and that goes into working at soul level. So basically we have like the mental level where we like understand like, okay, yeah, of course this happened in my childhood. I should be traumatized and be reacting. Then you kind of have the physical body aspect of like, this feels a certain way, or I have this illness or disease. But then you drop down to the spirit and soul level. And this kind of goes into soul retrievals and past lives. And what I have found is that when you work at the energetic lower levels, it ripples up. So a lot of things that people heal, we always want to understand, but a lot of things, it's all under the surface. It's all in the body. A lot of it's old. Some of it we don't understand. Some of it's ancestral. Some of it's past life. There's all these different layers of our being. And so when we work with spirit and go in at that deeper level, we can move a lot out. And then just surprisingly, clients are like, yeah, I feel lighter, or that's whatever I came to you just doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. And when I started working on people, I'm always skeptical too myself. And then I was always shocked at like what amazing results people got. And so, there's just so many different layers, but I really feel like the community aspect, movement, dance, and breath is becoming a big one for me right now in my personal journey. And then the energetic layers are the main things. And then really just connecting back to yourself. Like healers, they're not healing you. You're healing yourself. And so it's just really connecting people back to that wisdom and power that's within them at the end of the day.
Yeah. And can you talk about, when you start going on this journey, you'll start to hear things like shadow work, right? And that's that often it's often associated with this sort of deep uprising of these dark parts of ourselves, the unkind parts of ourselves, or the lost parts of ourselves that feel like places that we've rejected because they're like not correct. They're like not pleasant. And we don't feel like the conflict comes often from not actually just integrating them, not because that you have dark parts, but that you kind of refuse to accept those parts. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what shadow work is and what it is for you and how you like to work with that.
Yeah, I never really understood the word shadow work myself. Even, it's interesting. I get in a lot of these conscious communities, and I even feel like I feel very disconnected from the language. Because I was like, what is shadow work? And I realized the more I learned about what the word was used as, I was like, oh, I do a lot of shadow work with people, And so when I talk about shadow work, or if I were to use that word, it's really just the work that we do with our subconscious. Like, what is running in the background? What have we been programmed to believe? These could be stories that we tell ourselves. Like, we are not our stories. I can be like, I'm a little girl from this little town and blah, blah, blah. That's a story. It's not really who I am. I am so much more than that girl that grew up in that town, right? And so we have these stories about ourselves, or I'm never going to be a person that makes this much money. These are all stories, these beliefs that are in the background, subconscious fears that come from things. It's all the stuff that usually when you start tapping into brings up fear or discomfort. It's like, oh, I don't want to look at that. And this is usually the work that people don't, even when you go to a psychologist, they usually want to start talking about stuff. You're like, I really just don't want to talk about this. I don't want to like really face the reality or really look at this part of myself. I just don't want to, I'm not that kind of person. It's like, we're always trying to repress this side of ourselves that we don't want to be, but really that's where the gems are. That's where the gifts are. That's where the knowledge is. That's where all the stuff, the good stuff is, the treasure hunting that we're seeking. And
it should be called treasure hunting instead of shadow hunting. It should be called treasure hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as I've been doing years and years and years, every time I go into a deep healing process, just why do I keep doing this to myself? It's miserable. Even for someone like me, seasoned or whatever, it never gets better. It never gets more comfortable. It never gets more lighter. Usually when you start peeling off the layers, the shit just keeps getting more big and more whoa. Not to say that to scare people, but the thing that I started noticing every time I went in that space was I was more familiar about what to expect. I started seeing oh, this is temporary and I just got to move through it. And I actually am learning how to move through this stuff real quick versus sitting in it for months, right? And so that's where I started thinking, this is more like a dance. I had this metaphor of going to a bar and these shadows want to dance with you and they're the creepy, you're I don't want to dance with you. You smell bad. I don't know. But really they're a part of yourself trying to bring a treasure back to you. And you got to dance to learn the dance move that gets you that treasure or whatever. And so when you're doing shadow work, you have to move, you have to breathe, you have to feel and be open to learning a move or two. And then the second time you do if you're working on something else, you already remember the moves that you learned from the previous time. So then you're like, oh, I already got these steps. And then you learn another move. And each shadow kind of brings these new gifts, these new lessons to you. And all of this shadow work, all of this learning your subconscious is really just reminding you the fullness of movement within your own being, your fullness of your own expression, your fullness, the freedom of having the body and that it can really become kind of a fun thing. So now when I'm like really in it, dealing with something really heavy, I also can be like, all right, here we go. What you got? Like, how long is this going to take to dance with you? You know, I'm going to bring all my tools with me. Let's see what you have for me. And what are you trying to teach me? Like at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you're here for a reason. Let's get to the lesson. And it's just accelerated my ability to move through trauma, move through grief, move through these massive death and rebirths that seem to keep happening, you know, in this world, and expand and really just expand more into myself and my work and my purpose. And at the end of the day, just be able to live that life where I'm happy and I'm calm and I'm not stressed out. I'm not anxious like I used to. I'm not feeling alone. And, you know, things are just so much different right now in my life than they were a couple years ago. But I'm still going through it too. You know, we're all going through this. There's not one person that is just like, I'm good. I got everything. I'm happy.
Yeah.
You know?
I think one of the things that, you know, I don't know if you've said this word in particular, but it's the act of surrender. You get more comfortable with the idea of surrendering to the unknown. And you may not know what's going to come up, but you know that you'll be okay in the end. You know that it's harder if you resist. So you might as well just sort of like let something unfold and dance with that unknown. And the act of surrender becomes more familiar. And that's the thing that you kind of rely on, that you flow when you're in a state of surrender. So
totally. And even the definition of surrender changes the more you try to learn to surrender, which I've found, you know. But yeah, that's so true.
Well, I would love for you to talk about your initiative that you're starting next week, right? You're doing this free challenge, this free event. Can you tell everyone about it?
Yeah. So I'm doing 5 days. It's called basically Dancing with Your Shadow. And it's a 5-day deep soul healing experience. And what I have found for myself is that it's really good to just be able to try different modalities for healing. There's just so many modalities out there now. Science is finally backing up a lot of things that people, you know, it was kind of like on the fence about. But we're going to be, basically, there's going to be free group sessions. We're going to be dancing and moving. So there's going to be a lot of learning just how to be in the body, how to have fun in the body, dance, and have women's circle time. There's going to be daily journaling, daily like Spotify playlist. It's kind of like we're bringing the party to the shadow, and we're going to shine the disco light of love up on these shadows and really remind ourselves like who we are and have fun with this and know that, like, yes, the things that we go through in life are really heavy. They're very real. Grief and struggle and pain. It's so real. And it needs to be held with community. And you have to be supported. Absolutely. And you have to have spaces that you can go to. And there has to be a movement through it. There has to be you know, things that resonate with your soul that you're being called to do, even for a reason. And so the 5 days is really just an opportunity for people to come in and experience that community, learning daily rituals, experiencing different group sessions like EFT, which is tapping, shamanic healing, sound healing. I have a friend going to teach a foxy floor work to really tap into the sensual movement. I have a friend talking about plant medicine for those that are feeling called or kind of curious about that and kind of what that looks like in regards to shadow work. Because there's also a lot of non-psychedelic legal plant medicines that are very valuable. So we're going to be talking about some of that. And also just be held accountable. I think accountability is also a huge thing. When I have a group of sisters that we meet up every month, that if I don't have that, then you can stray. You can stray on your course. And so it's also like holding people accountable and having a space to come to and be like, did you do your journal prompts? What came up for you? And being seen and really just going through this experience and and also just trusting that everybody receives what they need from these events and from these experiences. So I just really want to offer kind of everything that has helped me and introduce people. Cause I'm also like a resource chick. I've done and tried so many things that at this point I'm like, I probably should just be a resource for people of like all the weird stuff that might work for you.
I think dance is one of the most potent things for women in terms of healing, because at least for me, because I know when I stray from my body, I know there's something going on here. When I give up dancing, when I stop treating my body well, when I stop moving, I'm like, oh, I'm avoiding something here. Something's going on. So it's a pretty key informant for me. Dance is a real unraveling of something that that I know I need to do. Because when I do it, I'm like, oh, there was a trapped energy here. I really needed to move this, and an energy needed to move inside of me, and emotion will get recalled. And I feel it's so potent for women.
Do you find yourself though, like you feel the resistance to move and sometimes even putting it off a couple days? You're just like, no, I just don't want to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's when it's sometimes nice to just go to a class or go to a group too, where like, I even do that. It's like, I don't do breath work unless I go to a class. Cause it's just like, I need that person to make sure and lead me through the whole thing. And I think that's where healers come in, is really helping you move through it and like see it through too. So you can actually get to the end, and versus keep getting stuck in the middle. And sometimes we all need that hand to hold sometimes, and that encouragement.
Yeah, this is why this challenge is so important. It's the accountability, and it's the invitation to remember that your body is a really key informant to understanding what's going on energetically with you.
Yeah, so, and this work can be fun. It doesn't have to be all something.
It can be beautiful. It can be really beautiful. Like this, I totally agree. I think that we, dance is supposed to elicit joy and some kind of deeper expression of your soul that you feel compelled to do. So how can people reach you? What's the best way to connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. You have that up. So if you go to my bio, all the information is on there. I'm also offering a 3-month program and a retreat starting in July. So you can click on that as well. But the 5 days.
And you're in Austin.
I'm in Austin, Texas. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so, but the 5 day starts next Thursday. You register and then you'll get daily emails, and you'll have Zoom links for all of the sessions and all the lives. And And you can also go to my website, wildwomanremembrance.com.
Ooh, great. I'll post that in the links below. And I posted your event where they can check it out, and a Wild Woman Remembrance to sign up and register.
Yes.
Wonderful. Amber, I'm so grateful that you're doing this. I love your work. I love what you're bringing to the world. It's so needed, especially for women. We need community. We need women that know how to lead us through to our deeper selves. We need women connected to their bodies. We need women connected to the earth. And we need to remember that that's one of our deep gifts as well, to kind of come back to our bodies and the earth and our intuition and our connectedness.
Yeah, if we have that, we have everything we want. That's the crazy thing. Once we come back to all that, you're good. You're good.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me this Friday night. Thanks for the people that were watching and commenting. And we will see you soon. And thank you.